Hi, everybody. Welcome to WIFF Off Script. I'm Vincent, Georgie. I'm the festival's Executive Director and Chief Programmer. Very happy to do a special episode today about the 2021 Hot Docs Festival. It runs from April 29th to May 9th. As you all know, this is definitely one of my favorite festivals of the year, without a shadow of a doubt. It's one I've been attending for probably about a decade now, if not a little bit longer. Hot Docs is North America's largest documentary festival, and a festival that we've partnered with since 2014, where we've done, as you know, a special Hot Docs slate of films at the festival, and many of our favorite films of past WIFs have all been selected, of course, from Hot Docs. Very, very fortunate today to have the Director of Programming Extraordinaire, Shane Smith, with us. Shane has been the top guy for programming for Hot Docs since 2015. And I must say, and he's not paid me to say this, not only is he an extremely great programmer, but he is a really nice guy. And in our industry, sometimes that can at times be lacking, but he is a talented person, but also just a great guy. So Shane, welcome to WIFF Off Script. Happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here to chat with you.
For sure. So congrats on locking the lineup and all these great films. You sort of revealed them like this big sort of surprise to film lovers of this is what we've been working on, and here are all your gifts to come on April 29th. So lots to unpack in your lineup. Can you talk to us a little bit about your opening night film this year, the Anne Shin film?
Yeah, we're really happy to be opening with Anne Shin, a great Canadian director, with her film Artificial Immortality, which is a look at AI, advances in artificial intelligence technology, but also comes from a very humane perspective, because the story starts with her sort of realizing that her father's getting older and his memory is starting to fade, and he was the story keeper of her family. So it sort of starts this journey for her into exploring memory and soul and keeping stories and connections and family alive, keeping yourself alive through the stories that you tell, which is a really great way into this sort of high-tech topic. And along the way, she interacts with Deepak Chopra, who has a digital Deepak version of himself that he's launched. So it's a very fascinating journey into the world of artificial intelligence. It's really accessible. And I think given that we've been living our lives for the past year online, with all of our interactions mediated by technology, I think it's a really sort of perfect encapsulation of where we are, but where we have the potential to go at this moment in time.
How much does that factor into your decision-making in a film that becomes your opening film in terms of the fit? Is this very, very much the right 2021 opening film? Do you feel that way?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think more and more in this last year, we have been reading films and looking at films in a different way, given all that's happened in the world, all of the cracks that have appeared because of the pandemic, the things that we've learned, the calls for, racial justice and equity. I think that's given us a slightly different lens through which to look at the films that we're seeing at the festival. And when you're choosing a film for opening night, you want it to be able to hold the weight of the slot that is opening night, so that the film stands up to the challenge of that, very looked upon slot. And, in a year like this, Artificial Immortality just sort of stood out as the right film at the right time, and the right filmmaker. Anne's a great filmmaker who's been working in the trenches for, at least the last dozen years. So to be able to sort of recognize her in this way as well was an important consideration for us.
Yeah, it's a huge honor for her and a huge opportunity at the same time. It's a little bit of both. But yeah, it's always been interesting in talking with filmmakers how much pressure they feel to be the opening film.
It's true. And it's a pressure, that we understand and don't take lightly as well. So there's amazing films in the festival, but that, could potentially have been opening night, but we have to evaluate, that against the pressure of that slot.
Oh, absolutely. And can you talk to us a little bit more about some of the themes that you're seeing in the program that you've put together for us around racial equity, around diversity, around inclusion, around some of the issues that we're contending with so very much in this moment, and necessarily so?
Yeah, a lot of these stories and these issues that have come to the surface or to mainstream attention in the last year are things that filmmakers have been looking at and digging into and investigating for many, many years. It's what documentary filmmakers do. They sort of look at injustice and look at what's wrong with the world and look at how we got here. So the world in a way has caught up with what a lot of documentary filmmakers have been doing. And so, we saw that coming through in the films that were submitted to the festival, even things like racial issues and reckoning and equality in a film like Subjects of Desire by Jennifer Holness, a great Canadian director. She's looking at racial inequity and cultural appropriation through the lens of Black standards of beauty and how they are being co-opted by, non-Black communities. So, that's a really specific sort of way into this film that opens up into the larger issues of appropriation and, racism through the story of Black beauty. So that, is really an effective way to get into these bigger issues. And a story like Who We Are, a chronicle of racism in America, which is an amazing look at how we got here, where we are today, through the things that have been done in the past. It's not a new story for a lot of Black audiences, for sure, but for a lot of us who were unaware of some of the deeper seated issues, this is a really great primer on the things that happened in the past and how they're the repercussions and the ripple effect that they're having today. So these kinds of stories that are very specific or start historically, but then bring us into the present day are something that we really, I think, as a programming team, gravitated towards this year because systems are breaking open and we are looking at films that are sort of explaining that to us, showing us what those systems are and were and the impact that they're having today.
I think it's one of the many reasons why Hot Docs is such an outstanding festival. What I always look forward to is very much whenever I go to Hot Docs, I'm always expecting to see the issues we're dealing with right now and what is happening, because there's something with documentary film that, in my view at least, always seems to be much more nimble and responsive to where we're at as a society. So I always look forward to how timely films at Hot Docs always are. I always find them very much, very, very, very on point. I've always found that and loved it about the festival. How is, let me ask, how has COVID shown up in films? There's that. And are we ready to be looking at that? Do you think there's audience appetite around that? Where are we at on that? What do you think?
Well, this is interesting. And speaking of timeliness, you're absolutely right. We were sort of bracing ourselves at the beginning of the programming season. We opened for submissions in September and we started seeing COVID films come in immediately. And I think, the time it takes for filmmakers to make a film about timely subjects is really compressing these days. There's a lot of tools that allow them to make films more quickly. And of course, COVID filmmakers picked up cameras right away when the pandemic began. And, I think we saw probably at least 60 to 80, if not more, films that had COVID as their main theme. And we knew we didn't want to, bombard people with COVID films. We're living it. We're all living it. We're all sick of it. But the films in the festival that address it come at it from really interesting, unique, and diverse perspectives, global perspectives. A film like Viral, which is made up of footage of YouTube creators who were following their journey through the COVID year from, January 1st, 2020 through to the riots at the Capitol in the US in January this year. So, that gives us a perspective on this, the Gen Z perspective on COVID and, the plans for the future and how they were disrupted through the footage that these creators are making, all throughout the year. So we're getting this real sort of intimate perspective on it, intimate personal perspective. And then there's a film like In the Same Breath from Nanfu Wang, an amazing Chinese director who lives in America, that's tackling the COVID issue from a systemic and political perspective, sort of comparing and contrasting the response in China and the cover-ups that may have happened in China to the US and the sort of flagrant disregard for science that was happening there. So they're able to draw these sort of big picture perspectives on the issue. When we're, living it on a day-to-day basis, they can illuminate different aspects of the impact and of what was happening behind the scenes in other countries, including Brazil. There's an incredible film called Siege, The Press versus Denialism, in the festival. It looks at Bolsonaro and his government's response to COVID. So we're seeing the Brazilian perspective, which is even more timely right now with things really going poorly in Brazil at the moment. This film shows us how they got to where they are today because of the choices that the government is making, the way they treated the pandemic, and the impact that it had on the press, who were just trying to report what's going on and have been demonized and branded fake news. A lot of the same authoritarian playbook, patterns used by different leaders around the world are shown in a film like Sieged.
It's always interesting when I'm always reminded of the danger that documentary filmmakers go through to make their film. I've always found that really quite remarkable at the inherent risk of all of it. I'm also glad you mentioned Nanfu Wang as well. I think she's such a terrific filmmaker. I really enjoy her work quite a bit, actually. I look forward to the new film for sure. And another program that is always standing at Hot Docs is your Big Ideas program. Can you talk to us a little bit about the films that are part of that slate?
Yeah. Big Ideas is always a great program because we bring together sort of, big topics, big themes, named guests to talk about the subjects and the themes of their films. And this year is no exception. We start off a little lighter with a film like Street Gang, How We Got to Sesame Street, which is sort of the origin story of Sesame Street, but really digs into, how this remarkable, unique show came to be and all the people working behind the scenes to make it happen, the cultural impact and the issues that they experienced trying to bring the show to air. So it's a real deep dive into the beginnings of this incredible show that still resonates, 50 years later. It's still a seminal part of many people's childhoods. So, having one of the original cast members from Sesame Street join us along with the filmmakers is a really great way to have this conversation, not only about the past, but also the continuing impact and resonance of the show today. And then, we'll have a film like Playing with Sharks, which is about an incredibly iconic Australian underwater photographer and environmentalist, Valerie Taylor, and her work starting in the 50s, 60s around conservation and sharks and the specific role that she has played in bringing, awareness about sharks and also, the dark side of this awareness bringing that they did to the fore. So having her join us is great as well. So Bruce Mao, the incredible Canadian design philosopher, artist, creator, coming to talk about his perspective and his philosophy about design and designing your life. The film Mao is a really beautiful origin story of him too, taking us all the way back to Sudbury, where he's from, and the very, difficult childhood he had and how that influenced his perspective on the world. So, these great, getting time with these incredible subjects to talk about their lives and their work. I mentioned Subjects of Desire, Jen Holmes' film about Black Beauty. We'll be talking about that with some of the subjects in the film too. So, we're able to dig into these issues in a live conversation format. And we'll have 5 of them throughout the festival. The 5th one is WeWork, which is about the implosion, the growth and implosion of the WeWork company. But it's a bigger story about the tech boom, about the dot-com boom and our rush to lionize the rogue entrepreneur who, who's a big talker, but maybe isn't doing the work on the other side, or, is able to get people engaged and caught up in his subject, but without having too much substance underneath. So, fascinating perspectives through these live conversations about the films in the festival.
And the conversations are half the reason we're there. That's really what the richness is, and that's always an excellent series. I always look forward to those films for sure. Let me ask you as well, Shane. As the top programmer, hidden gems, films that you're afraid will just get missed along the way that you really want to. Please point me and my team. Please point our WIFF audience in the right direction. What are the films that you're like, Vincent? Do not miss this.
Yeah, totally. So the rule of thumb from my perspective is if you haven't heard about the film or if it's from a country that you never see a film from, check it out, because there are 66 countries represented in the festival. So we're showing you sort of the best documentaries from around the world. And yes, there's a lot from the US and a lot of great films from Canada as well. But digging into the program in terms of watching foreign language docs, I think is something that I recommend to everybody, because you think that you can see, everything everywhere. It'll become available in some way, but so many of these documentaries will never again be seen, in this country. The audiences won't have the opportunity. So, a couple of treats that I love in the festival, that they're all fantastic, but these are some that I really want to make sure people see. There's a film from Chile called Gaucho Americano that's in our competition program. There's another one in that program called 4 Seasons in One Day, which is a take on Brexit from a very unexpected perspective. So, Brexit is done and dusted, but there's the on-the-ground repercussions that we're starting to learn more about too. So I recommend those two. Special presentations, some great high-profile work and subjects in there, but viral, as one I mentioned earlier, in terms of a different perspective on COVID, for sure. And then there's a film like Taste of Desire, which is about oysters, but it's a very philosophical and beautiful take on the oyster and what it means to different people who are working with oysters. Everyone from an oyster farmer, of course, and chefs, to a burlesque dancer who emerges as an oyster from a pearl as part of her act. So it's an unexpected take on the subject. World Showcase is always worth a look. There's always incredible work in that program. I recommend Last Days at Sea from the Philippines. Beautiful coming of age story, just incredibly gorgeous, very, very well made, well shot, and a really engaging young subject there. The Artscapes program, you can't go wrong with that program. I'm Juanita in the Artscapes program from Australia. Australia's self-proclaimed queen of honky tonk, who is, making her last gasp at the crown of success. And turns out her biggest enemy is herself. Her biggest obstacle is herself. And she's an unforgettable character. So definitely check out that one. Along with The Story Won't Die, which is a different take on the Syrian refugee crisis. And there's a few films in the festival, actually, that are giving us a different look at that crisis, sort of post-ISIS, and the impact, the legacy, in quotes, of ISIS and the impact that it's continuing to have. But this is through the perspective of artists who all left Syria when the regime turned their attention to them, and how they are using their art to tell their story, but also to complicate the narrative about what we in the West expect when we're looking at a refugee story. So, it's a film that works on a number of layers, but has these incredible performances as part of it as well. So just a few.
Done. They're all happening, especially the one on oysters. That one, I love it. Love oysters. I love all of it. I love just I think what this really leads me to my next question was, what does this slate that you and your team have put together for us tell us about this moment? What does it tell us about 2021? Overarching, you've got the view of the totality of what you've programmed.
Yeah.
Where are we at?
Yeah, we are definitely at a point of questioning everything, for sure. And that's, of course, one of the things we all love about documentaries is the way they're able to dig below the surface of the story and reveal, unexpected and unexplored layers to these stories. So that's happening almost throughout the program, actually. There's a desire to question how we got to where we are today, what caused that, and what we can do to change things and make things better. So there's certainly, optimism in a lot of the films. And, often people say documentaries are so heavy, they can be so depressing. And certainly there's a heaviness because these are important subjects for filmmakers to explore. But a lot of the time they're doing it so that they can bring us into the light. They can give us, help us chart a path forward. So we're certainly seeing questioning and rejection of the status quo, the systems and the historical precedents that have led us to where we are today, but also an awakening and an eye-opening about, yes, this is what's been done, but what's our path forward? How can we move through this moment to create a more just world for all of us, both in terms of social and political issues, but also environmental as well, and we're questioning everything. We've been locked away at home for the last year. So a lot of us are asking personal questioning ourselves about what we're doing, why we're doing it, work-life balance, all of these things. So I think it's a year where the audiences, where we are, meets where the filmmakers are in a really powerful way in a lot of the stories. So that's been good to see. That I think there'll be added resonance to so many of the films and the way audiences view the films this year.
It's definitely a very contemplative past year we've spent. And we have a lot of time to think about where we're at, who we are, what we want to be. Yeah, I agree. Let me add one piece too. Whenever I get this comment a lot, as obviously you do, on docs are very heavy, or the film is very heavy, or it's depressing. And my 10-cent answer is always, every bad film is depressing. No good film can ever be depressing, ever, ever. It's impossible. Same thing with length of films. All good films are the right length. All bad films are always too long.
Exactly. 100% agree.
I never subscribe to anything around the film ever being depressing if it's a good film. I just don't know that it can be. I think of a film that you did a couple of years ago, For Sama, that we showed that a lot of people loved, but thought like, oh, it's depressing. That's impossible that film's depressing. It can't be depressing. Not at all, actually. Quite the opposite, in my view.
Yeah, it's a gut punch, but a needed gut punch that makes us see things in a different way.
Yep.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Not at all. How is it different this year putting this slate together? Because last year's slate you've been putting together in a pre-COVID world, and then this year it's really been fully a COVID, different phases and all that type of thing. How did this roster come together?
I mean, the situation was certainly complicated in terms of logistics and structure and what we were able to tell filmmakers about how their film would be presented. So, on the back end, on the administrative side, it was certainly a challenge. On the front end, on the programming side, we were nervous going into the programming season about, how much good work there would be, were filmmakers ready to screen their films, even in an online world. But we were really, really pleasantly surprised by the quality of the work and the great number of submissions that we got, and the range of stories that were being told. So it's certainly been complicated on the logistics side, but not in terms of the quality of the work. And it's a year from when we had to make this pivot with the festival in 2020. So the world's changed and the industry's changed, but in a way, the desire and demand for documentaries and for programming has only increased. We're watching more and more of everything, including documentaries. So the opportunities are still there, and filmmakers and sales agents, distributors understand that. And it's just a different way of getting that work, introducing that work to the world. But the business is still happening. Hot Docs is a big industry festival as well. So we're always looking for films that industry will grab a hold of and pick up and sell, and will get bought for distribution. So, that balance is still an important part of the festival.
I'm glad it sounds like the industry is still quite healthy, which is important. Can you speak a little bit about how doc filmmakers are doing, or what are you seeing and sensing from the filmmakers and the overall industry, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, this year has just reminded me how resilient documentary filmmakers are, and determined they are to bring these stories to the world. So, documentary filmmaking has continued throughout the pandemic in a way that fiction filmmaking has not been able to. Big sets, big crews, a lot of people involved, whereas a documentary crew can be as simple as the director with the camera and mics on people. So they've been able to continue making films. So the quality and the range of stories is continuing. I think, funding has both been easier and harder in a way. There was a lot of funding support sort of released early in the pandemic to help filmmakers tell stories, but then other programs have closed down. So I think the situation, in a way, it remains similar, but there are more questions being asked of who's getting funded and how they're getting money and how decisions are made. So, those kinds of questions about equity and diversity have become an important part of the conversation in the documentary world. But filmmakers will find a way to bring these stories to life, no matter what it takes. And that's one of the inspiring things. I'm inspired by them to do our best to bring their work to the world.
Shane, in the totality of the 2021 festival, what are you the most proud of in any way, shape, or form?
It's a good question. I think one of the things I'm most proud of is the diversity in the festival. I mean, gender-wise, we've been, hitting gender parity for at least the last 4 years. So, that's something that's built in to our vision of the programming. But to be consciously looking at, the diversity, both in terms of stories, but also behind the camera and the countries that were represented, and being able to bring films from 66 different countries, and just under 40% of the programming is made. The films are made by BIPOC filmmakers. So to be able to provide a platform to amplify those voices that deserve to be heard and need to be heard is one of the core foundational elements of our programming as a team. And the team is one voice in terms of making room for many voices. So we're really thrilled at the range and diversity of the programming and the quality of the films. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's something we're proud of and something we're sad about, because for every film that's in the festival, there is another one that could have been in the festival. We're saying no to so much great work. So that's a responsibility that we take very seriously as well when we're shaping the program. But this truly is something for everyone in the festival program. No matter what your interests are, you will find something to really enjoy at the festival.
For a lot of our fans here at the festival that will be attending Hot Docs for the first time, possibly online, how would you guide someone that has never attended and maybe not even ever been to an online festival, period? How would you advise them to experience their first Hot Docs?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much. There's 219 films in the festival. So it can feel like it's a little overwhelming, a little daunting. And, that's why we've talked about some specific films and subjects here, so that can be a way in to the festival for them. It's, it's very simple. It's like, it's like a streaming site. So it's easy enough to get online and to start watching the films. But when you're looking for where to start, I would say, the Artscapes program is a great place to start. The theme program this year is a great place to start. Systems Down, looking at a range of different issues in the world, but also people joining together to find ways forward. And then, if you're into binge watching, our Deep Dive program brings some incredible TV programming, including a 7, almost 8-hour series called Philly DA that was at Sundance this year. It's amazing, embedded with the new Philly DA, who's a bit of an activist himself, who's cleaning house, and the repercussions that has. That's 8 hours, but you will want to watch all of it. So I would say, first of all, clear your schedule, make some time. Set out a chunk of time every day and just dig in. I mean, you can buy a single film, you can buy a 5-pack or a 10-pack, or you can buy the festival pass, which will give you, access to everything that's in the festival over the 10-day window of the festival. But also that viewing period for pass holders is extended for another 10 days. So they've got a little bit of extra access to enjoy as much as they can. So just look for something that piques your interest, click on it, and enjoy the ride.
That's awesome. Click on it and enjoy the ride. I like that. We're going to definitely make sure all of the links to the festival and to be able to buy tickets, all that are all available in the video. We'll also, of course, be promoting the festival as well. I can't wait. Myself and our programming team can't wait. It's absolutely an annual highlight of ours. And we've put together another, as expected, outstanding schedule. And awesome.
And the mailman's here.
Yeah. Well, the mailman and your dog agree that's a fantastic lineup for Hot Docs 2021. Shane Smith, thank you so much for joining me today. Really, really appreciate it. And congrats on everything that Hot Docs is doing. Thanks very much.
Pleasure. Thanks so much, Vincent.
Thanks, Shane. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy.